Hey, this is Web3 Talks. The rule of this podcast is simple. We only talk with people who have hands-on Web3 building experience. So if you are a hacker, entrepreneur, or investor, you can get inspired by their stories, lessons, and fuck-ups. My name is Mac, and I'm hosting this pod. If you want to stay in touch, go to twitter.com/Web3Talks, click the link in the pinned tweet, and join our Discord community. Let's go. Today's guest is Gilbert, founder of 0xFrens. And 0xFrens is a very interesting tool for communities because what it does, if you have for example, developer DAO NFT, you can get matched for one-on-one chat with other community members every week. So you can get to know each other instead of seeing this random, nicks and animal profile pictures that you don't know who is behind them. So in some sense, it's like a chat roulette, but you don't get matched every 5 seconds. You get matched every week, and you get matched only with people that you have something in common. In this sense, getting matched with people who hold the same NFTs that are like a gate pass to the community. And one good thing, there are no dicks. No one shows their dicks, as far as I know, which is a very good innovation compared to chat roulette. So, Gilbert, could you share with us, why have you created 0xFrens and what's your and 0xFrens story here?
Yeah, by the way, thanks for having me on the show, Mac. Great to be here. 0xFrens started at the start of 2022 when some of the people I've worked with in my past startup and I started thinking about what we could be doing in Web3. We were largely motivated by seeing all these exciting changes that Web3 has brought about, whether that's NFTs, whether that's social tokens, whether that's DAOs. It was very exciting to see a new wave of consumer behaviors that seemed to point towards a paradigm shift. So we basically came into Web3 with the thought of, let's find some interesting problems to tackle and see if we can solve something interesting for people in Web3. So where that led us was we started talking to a lot of community leads. We started talking to people who participate in DAOs. Of course, we also participated in some ourselves to figure out what is actually going on. And, it was interesting, talking to a lot of community leads. They pointed out very similar problems across the board, which was that as nice as it is to have tens of thousands of Discord users in their Discord community, they felt that very few of them actually know each other. Very few of them are actually engaged in the community. And most of them just kind of drop by and engage in, creating memes and things like that. And that worries them on multiple levels. On one hand, it doesn't seem like lasting engagement. And on the other hand, it seems to fall a little bit short, if not very much short, of the mark of the aspirations of where DAOs are supposed to be, which is a place where people come together and build things as a community that wasn't possible before. So that's where we started. We started thinking about, how do you actually engage people? How do you actually build real relationships in DAOs and Web3 communities? And that's what brought us to start building 0xFrens.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I felt it myself because DAOs can be a very lonely place especially when you're a new contributor and you feel like some people know each other, they interact on Discord, but you are like this person coming to a house party that doesn't know anybody, and there's no host who will just say, hey, I can, connect you with other people. You have this introduction channel, but they are not that deep. So I totally agree with it. And you have worked in Google before, as far as I know. What have you been doing there?
Yeah. So prior to starting 0xFrens, I spent almost a decade building consumer-facing technology. Some of that time was spent at Google, working on products like YouTube Music, Google Pay, Google Machine Learning. So, I spent a lot of time thinking about where consumer tech is going. And then after I left Google, I co-founded a startup called Shuffle, which was a social podcasting platform where we thought a lot about how can people interact in podcasts in a way that makes it feel much more social and much less isolated? So in a way, there is a bit of a theme there. We keep seeing problems around trying to figure out how to connect people on the internet, making better tools and platforms where people can come together and build things.
Yeah, and what I like about 0xFrens is that it plays to Web3 strengths in the sense that in Web2, you couldn't match people based on what they hold in their wallets because there were no wallets like this. Obviously, you could match people based on what kind of Facebook group they are part of or what hashtag they follow or whatever. But this is, in many cases, less honest signal than owning an NFT, even if this NFT is free, just like in Jericho case, one of your users. So I'm wondering, what was design process behind it? How have you came up with the actual product?
Yeah. So first of all, you're absolutely right. Web3 has enabled an open platform where, your wallet essentially becomes a sort of an identity that you can carry to any product, to any part of the internet. And so in a way, we are taking advantage of that by figuring out, how to match people based on what's in their wallet. As for our product design process, it has always been about talking to users and getting their feedback first and foremost, iterating quickly, and building a minimal viable product, getting it out to the same users and getting the feedback, and then repeat, and rinse and repeat. Before what the product you see today, we actually were a Discord bot that was trying to match people and introduce them through text. And what the feedback, at least, and both the feedback and the observation we made was that text doesn't really solve the problem of building connections. And if we're going to build some genuine connections, we should prompt people to jump onto a call and actually have them talk to each other more deeply than a few texts here or there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's why I guess you integrated both Telegram and Calendly into the product. So do you have any specific insights that were surprising to you? Something that, you predicted that, okay, you had a hypothesis like users want X and it turned out they want Y or Z or anything else?
Yeah, there's been a whole bunch. For example, I mentioned, we started as a Discord bot. Discord is ubiquitous in Web3, but it was extremely hard to get people to install, but get community admins to install a Discord bot, and also for users to try a Discord bot, especially during the time in the middle of 2022 where people were very scared of any kind of potential hacks or security issues related to Discord. That was one thing that kind of led us to move away from that. And then once that happened, now you open a Pandora box of how do you notify people? How do you get people in Web3 to do all the basic things like receiving notifications, logging in, connecting their wallets? That's where, we started kind of exploring different communication channels. We started with email and realized that most emails get lost nowadays. And then we shifted to Telegram, where a lot of Web3 users are familiar with the product and they understand how it works. So, it's almost like every month we kind of get some of these smaller insights directly from our users. And that's how we've been kind of iterating and improving the product over time.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything that was the most counterintuitive apart from the Discord bot that you've mentioned?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's very interesting is that there's a lot of things we do in real life that we find very natural. But then when you try to mimic it online, digitally, people suddenly feel a little bit way more awkward than before. So for example, in real life, people have coffee chats all the time. Even the most shy people will occasionally grab dinner or have a chat with somebody over a coffee. And nobody ever walks out of a coffee chat and goes what am I supposed to talk about? Very few people do that once they're out of college, once they're through that phase of awkward teenage years. But you bring users online, you bring them onto a Zoom call, suddenly people feel a lot more hey, there's suddenly this kind of consciousness of what is the goal of this call? What am I supposed to say? I cannot have any awkwardness and any zero amount of silence during this call. And so part of the problem we realized that we're actually tackling is how do you take a lot of processes that have been culturally ingrained in real life, like grabbing a coffee, networking, building reputation in real life in an implicit way. How do you take all of that and do it in a digital realm in a way that people, one, in a way that works, but also two, in a way that people feel comfortable with? It's an interesting North Star, and it's one that is not obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I had a chat with Vlad the other day based on this 0xFrens match. And I felt it for a second because when I do a video call, I feel that like I don't do video calls for fun. Like if I talk with my family, I talk on the phone, typically not for a video call. So they typically have like a goal in mind. But when you're just about to chat with a person, you're like, okay, but like, what's the goal? Is it just like have fun? But having a call, like online call, is not as fun as having a real life call, a real life meeting, obviously. So what I liked about 0xFrens is that you can check the person's wallet and see what NFTs they hold. And then you have these like icebreakers that you can start with. So this is something cool. And I guess like in the future, you might add some, talk with me about, and like, I don't know, football or like smart contracts and so on.
Definitely, we think the profiles will help with kicking off the calls. And over time, as more and more people, as they interact more with Web3 and more of their identity becomes integrated with their wallet, it'll result in better matches and it'll result in more interesting conversations as well, due to the kind of the maturity of your wallet profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you are used, by Developer DAO, Jericho, and some other builders-oriented communities. So I'm wondering, like, how have you acquired your first users and how do you do it now?
Yeah. At the beginning, there wasn't a lot of community aspects to it. At first, we were thinking of like kind of lunch club for Web3, just connecting random people who are interested in Web3 and prompting them to jump on a call. But as we kind of talk to more communities, we realized that actually it's more interesting if we introduce people within the same community. There's more accountability. There's a tighter knit group of people who feels the need to talk to each other. And most importantly, we become aligned with the community leads in various DAOs and Web3 communities. So in terms of user acquisition, it becomes not so much about trying to get ourselves in front of Web3 users as much as it's about talking to community leaders and getting them to understand why our product helps them, and then letting them introduce 0xFrens to their community. So that's why you see us partnering with Jericho, partnering with Skylabs, and we also, in some instances, we work with communities that we don't have like some kind of official buy-in, but some of their users use us directly because they've seen us in other communities. So in a way, it's kind of like a B2C2C product almost. We pitch to communities and then the communities introduce us to their users.
Mm-hmm. And who was your first user? Like the first community that used you?
Jericho. Yes. And because Jericho actually, even before 0xFrens, they already had a similar matching system, but it was all done manually. So it was done, I believe Vlad was doing it in some type of spreadsheet, and then he would just randomize the rows and try to match people. Of course, over time, that's a bit tedious and leads to some repeat matches. And so we stepped in and built something automated and also built something that allows people to actually, keep their connections afterwards, manage their contacts afterwards, and over time have more interesting social features built on top.
And I'm wondering, what are your metrics right now? Like, how do you measure success in terms of growth, but also in terms of, product engagement?
Yeah. So one thing that is kind of weird about our product is like, we don't actually know if somebody has, like ideally, our metric would be how many people shows up to a call, right? That would be the ideal metric. Unfortunately, it's basically impossible to measure that. We can't track whether somebody has messaged another person and scheduled a call and actually made it to the call. So over time, we kind of like gave up on that idea. Instead, now we just focus on, tracking people coming onto our platform on a weekly basis, and then comparing that to basically weekly active users over monthly active users. Like how many percentage of our monthly active actually come back on a week-to-week basis. And that gives us a sense of how interesting are the matches per week and how interesting is a platform to people that are active on it. And gives us a kind of a good idea of whether a product is working or not.
Yeah, as you said, it's kind of weird product because like most of the user's experience is not reliant on you because it's reliant on the person that they talk with, like whether the second person shows up, if they show up, whether it's a cool conversation or not. So you're kind of like, your success depends on the quality of people that you have in your matching pool. So if you have interesting people that are reliable in a sense that like when they have a call, they show up, then your product will succeed. But if you go the other side and if you had, like totally random people that were boring, didn't have anything in common and totally unreliable, your product wouldn't be able to give people positive experiences.
Exactly. And yeah, so it's important for us to start off with the right groups, being aware that, we can't just go into any random NFT community and expect good results. We are pretty precise about finding builder communities that are active, where people are interested in networking and interested in meeting more Web3 folks. And that's where we've started.
Mm-hmm. And have you thought about integrating video chat inside the tool so then you could see whether a person really seen each other?
Yeah, we have. There's definitely some tooling around that, and we could try to make that work. I think where we ended up on this problem was that we think that there are more things to build that actually changes the product significantly that we can focus on before essentially micro optimizing our way into the sole purpose is to track people even deeper. So we're focused on building out different features that we think make for a better experience. And we think some of the proxy metrics we have right now is good enough to figure out whether it's working.
Okay. And so what's on your roadmap? Like what features you're planning? Because you're essentially a social app. Since you can build and use a social graph that you have, you can also befriend people on 0xFrens. So what are your plans?
Yeah. This week, actually, in a couple of days, we're going to be launching something very, very exciting. It's called 0xFrens Kudos. And the whole idea of Kudos is to reward people in your community who are helping each other. You mentioned earlier, like, hey, what is the goal of jumping onto a call? What's the goal of kind of engaging with your community? Well, with Kudos, we make it very clear that the goal is to help each other and to make your community even better over time. And if you do meet somebody who is able to help you out in some way that you appreciate, you can send them a Kudos, which is part story and part gift. In the story portion, you write out a what actually happened, why you're thanking this person, what did they do that you're appreciative of. And on the gifting part, you can attach several Matic tokens as an appreciation for the other person's act of kindness or act of service. What this does is it does a few things. First of all, it helps reward, incentivize, and highlight the positive actions that are happening in the community. But more importantly, we can start building out reputation for anybody in the community such that going forward, other people who interact with that person or interact with that wallet even can see based on your Kudos that this wallet or this person holding the wallet is somebody worthy of their trust, somebody that is actually reputable and not a random stranger on the internet who might just be there to scam something in your wallet and things like that. So where we see Kudos going is We're focusing people in the community towards a very direct goal of rewarding positive behaviors within their community. And at the bigger picture, enabling and rewarding people with reputation so that Web3 as an ecosystem can become a much safer and more trustworthy place to interact.
Mm-hmm. So in the long run, do you plan to evolve to Web3 social platform like Lens or Farcaster, or do you want to keep yourself specialized and be part of the communities?
We want to be very focused on social experiences that takes advantage of Web3 properties. So, at the start of the show, you mentioned the fact that we rely on wallet content to build out wallet profiles. And now with Kudos, we focus very much. Kudos is something that, you can't build on Web2. You can't just send somebody a note of appreciation, attach some type of tokens to it, and have it associated in an open platform to any identity that you wish. So these are things that we think, these are social experiences that we think are very, very specific to Web3, and it creates a unique experience in Web3. We'll definitely consider things like, how can people build a decentralized social graph? Whether that's through Lens protocol, whether that's through some other protocol. It's definitely on our roadmap because we think that it is another part of Web3 that will be needed. But in terms of kind of like building out something a bit more generic, like a Twitter-esque experience or something along the lines of Farcaster, at this moment, we don't think we will focus on that unless we see an angle that is very, very, that really takes advantage of the unique aspects of Web3.
Just a short break to remind you that if you like this podcast, please don't hesitate to subscribe and give it a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use. Thanks a lot. I'm wondering, as you had over a decade experience, in Google and running your startup, are there any particular lessons from that part of your life that you can rely on when building 0xFrens?
Absolutely. It's a little bit cliche, but at the end of the day, I think running a startup is all about building quickly and iterating quickly and getting user feedback in a way that keeps your whole team accountable. So you got to have some North Star metric. You got to have a way to build a hypothesis, build quickly, and then ask yourself, is the hypothesis correct? Are we hitting the North Star metrics? Are the users giving us the response that we expected them to? And if the answer is no, you got to move on quickly. There's no time to kind of stay in wishful thinking mode. You got to move on and iterate quickly and try something different. I think that's been the case both at my last startup and with 0xFrens, it's even more true.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any particular way of gathering this feedback?
I think thankfully with Web3, largely, you can basically talk to people in a relatively open way. You can literally jump into Discord and just yell into the void and ask people questions and see how they respond. Of course, you also still need to build, you can only kind of yell into a Discord channel for so long. You need to build some of those connections. You need to know a few individuals, especially those who are interested in your product, and continue to message them over time to get their feedback. It helps that the product itself literally matches me and my team with random people who are using the product. So naturally, we get direct feedback. That helps a lot for sure. I mean, the good thing is it doesn't take a ton of feedback to see what's working and what's not. I think Y Combinator had this idea of talking to 7 people to get an idea of where a product is. I sometimes think you don't even need 7 people. Even 3 to 5 will typically give you a pretty good idea of the obvious pain points that people are facing.
Yeah. For me, it was typically 15, 20 because I was digging deep. But what's pretty interesting, when you do these customer conversations, is that you very fast can learn that many of these answers are repeating themselves. And it's typically a good sign that you found something that many people share. So it's really cool that you can dog food 0xFrens and use it to get matched with other people, because it feels very natural to talk about the experience. And actually, this is something that now, when I think about it, like if I was building a product, I might implement 0xFrens just for that, just to stay in touch with the users and have this this forcing function, something that will tell me, okay, you need to do it like every day or every week or whatever. Not forget about it when I'm, building and busy looking at Asana or Jira or whatever.
Exactly.
So what are like the biggest growth and technical challenges that you see on the horizon?
In terms of growth, we're coming to an interesting spot in Web3 where, obviously right now it's a bear market. A lot of communities have quieter now compared to a few months ago. So naturally for us as well, building with the communities has limited growth on our product. The nice thing, I think, is that on the bright side, I think increasingly Web3 products, other Web3 products recognize this as well. And there's an increasing shift to target Web2 users and to figure out how we can onboard more Web2 users. I think there will be a lot of technical challenges and user challenges around that. But, we're generally optimistic about how our products can fit in, how wallet profiles and Kudos and concepts like Kudos and online reputation can bring more Web2 users to understand why Web3 can be helpful to them.
Yeah, like when I think about it, like I can even imagine that if I run a big company, big 100+ people or whatever, I might just airdrop them NFTs, like soulbound NFTs, like they are employees of the company, and just match them. Like even inside the company, it's so useful to get matched with people and just have a chat, because it's so easy to get siloed when you reach a certain scale, especially when we are working remotely. So I'm wondering like if this might be a vector for you.
I think it's something to think about. SaaS tools for internal company building, definitely there's some competition. We're generally more optimistic around, how can we enable reputation building in Web3? Because if we're able to solve some of those problems around reputation and trust, it's not just a Web3 problem, it's an internet-wide problem. If there's a Web2 user out there wondering like, okay, what is the point of Web3? If we can basically answer them, hey, it's one of the problems that Web3 can solve is we're going to help you build out a profile and make your online identity much more trustworthy so that you can get yourself into communities or earn yourself interesting jobs. Like that becomes a very, very direct value proposition for Web2 users. So, I think our focus later on in our roadmap is going to be more focused on the reputation building and identity building. We look forward to doing more there.
Okay. And so far, like, were there any hard decisions and trade-offs that you had to make?
I think every time it's very easy to say, oh, just look at the numbers, see if your users are happy, and then iterate. It's so easy to say it, but it's always really, really hard to then say, all right, let's pivot the product towards a different direction. It really runs against, I think, most people's intuition. Nobody wants to admit they're wrong. Nobody wants to then convince their whole team that they were all wrong. It's very hard. And so, a lot of our hardest decisions is to go through that process of launching something, getting excited about it, over time recognizing that it's not quite working, and then mutually convincing each other that it's time to shift the product drastically to try a new hypothesis, tackle the same problem, but differently.
Mm-hmm. And what was the kind of hypothesis that you had to drop in a way that you described?
So at first we thought building on top of Discord would be a great idea. And then once we actually tried it, was like, oh, okay, that's not great. We also thought that when we at some point we thought our proposition would be Lunch Club for Web3. And then we realized that actually a product like Lunch Club doesn't create a lot of accountability for people to actually show up and talk to each other. Right? So I think over time, these hypotheses parts of it turns out to be right, parts of it turns out to be wrong. A lot of the trade-offs really is figuring out which part of the hypothesis are right, keep those, and then which part of it is very much off and make that adjustment, sometimes drastic adjustments to the product.
Yeah, and it's always hard to choose a niche because like if you're a launch club for Web3, you might think, oh, my total addressable market is so giant. There are millions of people. And if you say, okay, but I will only focus on communities and maybe the established ones, it's very hard because you think, okay, maybe I have, 100,000 people or 500,000 people in the whole world to serve when it comes to Web3. So it's a smaller market. Obviously, it will grow and you can then add another market. But it's always hard to make this decision to just focus.
I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, it's definitely a hard trade-off. The way we think about it is, there needs to be kind of like a bigger goal that addresses, say, something big like the entirety of Web3 or the entirety of the internet. So for us, it might be, how do you solve reputation on the internet? Or how do you enable users and communities online to collaborate more effectively? That could be kind of like the overarching question. But once it comes to implementation, it has to be very, very specific. So that could be the overarching question, but the product needs to be, which 100 users are we trying to target? Who are our first 100 users? Why do they need us right now? Not in the future, but right now. And how do these 100 users bring about a start to the network that will expand over time so that it will eventually solve the bigger overarching problem that we agreed on before?
Yeah. So I'm wondering, because you decided to build 0xFrens, but if you were not building 0xFrens, what would you build in Web3?
That's a really good question. It's a really tough one. I generally am very excited about what kind of products do communities need and being able to grow alongside communities and DAOs. So we would probably end up building, if we weren't building 0xFrens, we would kind of dive deeper into how communities onboard people today, how people contribute to communities today, whether that's through bounties or through Discord, and try to figure out if there's a way we can kind of 10x the existing processes.
Yeah, I just started thinking that, in the future, like if you had something like Decentraland or Sandbox or whatever, you could get matched like in a metaverse with people. So you just teleport at, 2 p.m. and just talk to each other. And then it might feel sometimes even more engaging if you provide this RPG experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think with an open platform and with all these aspirations towards building out a metaverse, I think we're only going to see more interesting experiences over time.
And Gilbert, if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing about Web3, what would you fix?
I'm quite excited about where account abstraction is going. The thing that's broken, at least one of the things that's broken, I think, is just the clunky interface of getting your own wallet and having to defend these keys as if it was like some really, really dark secret that only you can know about. And if you lose it, the entire world collapses around you. The average user will never quite understand that. So I hope that account abstraction can just, start working everywhere and people can adopt it, starting tomorrow, and more innovation around how keys and how wallets are managed can get into users' hands as soon as possible.
Yeah. In 5-10 years, we'll look at this era, just we look at the era of people that had to build their own server to just, host a website on the internet and just, learn everything to do very basic things. So yeah, I totally agree with you. The fact that you have to keep it and many people just don't even it seems natural in the sense that 40,000 years, I guess people were hiding their most precious things. I don't know, the food, weapons or whatever was precious back then, but nowadays, like we are not accustomed to having to protect our belongings in such a way. So this is a good point.
Certainly not in a digital way, I think. I think that part is very, very unintuitive.
Yeah. So like, have you seen any interesting or mind-blowing Web3 projects so far? Something that, got your attention?
I honestly don't have any, recently I haven't seen any crazy amount of Web3 projects that are mind-blowing. I actually think of it a little bit differently, which is, I think the whole ecosystem is quite mind-blowing. The whole idea that we now have this technology where people can essentially come together and invest in the same token and be able to manage an entity in a way that you can kind of see what how much the treasury has, who is controlling the treasury, how much is going in and out of the treasury. I think not enough non-Web3 people, or even some Web3 people, don't seem to appreciate how mind-blowing that is. I think the analogy we got to go back to is that compare, let's say, setting up a community in Web3 that has a shared treasury, that has group management on their treasury, and can allow anybody on the internet to invest. If you compare that to like setting up a company that even enables maybe 10 investors, good luck. I don't know how long, the amount of legal work, the amount of paperwork and banking work that goes into setting up that company. And at the end of the day, to do all that work, only to have people email you and ask you hey, how much more runway do you have? Hey, how do I know if I can trust you when we ask you about your runway? Show us the papers, which I can easily doc, by the way. But I think people don't quite appreciate how far we've come in the last few years. And hopefully, I think what's kind of missing right now is more outcome from various DAOs and communities, and more positive outcome that can be shown to the rest of the world in terms of how Web3 can enable collaboration around the world.
Yeah. I don't know where I read it, but there was this kind of quote that said that Web3 it's you see the cryptocurrencies and investing and NFTs at the surface area, but the background, the real revolution that's happening in the background is the governance revolution, how people coordinate each other, how they make decisions. And it can have a very far-fetched effects. On one hand, as you said, you can create a foundation or a community that wants to build something, or company, entity. But also, I can imagine a government structure, maybe not for a country, at least not yet, but for a city, where you could track every dollar from your taxes and how it has been spent because you had it on chain, which would be super cool. Maybe not for many politicians that want to hide these dollars, spend them on their friends' services and products, but it could be something really, really revolutionary. And it's kind of in the background because, the picture of a rock sold for $1 million gets all the headlines, obviously, but I'm with you here when it comes to being in awe of the ecosystem. So do you have any funny things that happened to you so far in the ecosystem?
I think occasionally, you mentioned at the start of the show, it's not like chat roulette where you get the occasional dick pics and whatnot. Haven't got that yet, but I do occasionally get somebody coming onto a call half naked, and completely not looking very professional, and just having I guess they think it's a very chill way to kind of chat with somebody on the other side of the world. But it does happen. Sometimes it takes place on, they're clearly in their bed on a laptop. Other times they're in some random place in a resort somewhere, kind of walking around and just having a chat in a beach somewhere. So it can be quite amusing, the type of people, the diverse set of people that you end up meeting in Web3. And on one hand, it's very nice to see all this diversity, but sometimes it leads to pretty hilarious moments.
Yeah. So, Gilbert, we're getting to the end, and I have a question, a very important one. And it's where people can learn more about 0xFrens, and if they want to test it, maybe add it to their community, what should they do? to make it happen?
Yeah. So in terms of like following our product and learning more about it, follow us on Twitter. So our handle is 0xFrens XYZ. That's 0xFrens XYZ. You'll get product updates there, and we'll be, especially with major product launches, it will blog more in details about what we're aspiring to do. And then in terms of like signing up for the product itself, it's you go directly to our web app, 0xFrens.xyz. Whether you're a user, whether you are a community manager, you can check us out there and also reach out to us to see how we can help better the communities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks a lot. So one last question, and it is like, do you have any builders in mind, someone who build interesting Web3 products that might make a good material for a guest here?
I don't know if he still calls himself a builder, but I was chatting with somebody yesterday who to be a product manager and is now advising a lot of Web3 startups. His name is Ma Ming, and happy to connect you guys and see if he can help onto the show. I think he's seen a lot of Web3 products, both in whether it's DeFi, whether it's SocialFi, whether it's DAO tooling. And he has a lot of interesting ideas on kind of new Web3 products that potentially change the way we operate.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Gilbert. Thank you for your time. And, see you on 0xFrens, hopefully one day.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mac. It was great talking to you.
So this is almost the end. But if you like this episode and don't want to miss the next ones, feel free to subscribe. If you liked it a lot, I'd be personally grateful if you could give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use. Thanks to these ratings, more people can learn about Web3 Talks, and it's really important to me. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.